I'm Stefan Baumann. I would like to invite you on a special journey. To discover the splendor, encounter the grandeur, feel the excitement. Come along with me as we experience the thrill of painting outdoors. A 3-day journey that will change your art forever. In one of America's most stunning locations, Mount Shasta. Everything you need to know is on our website, www.stefanbaumann.com. We'll get to some of the process of painting and we'll discuss everything that I do. There's so many questions and everybody's like, yeah, what do you use? How do you use? How do you travel? What do you do? I'm not going to work at this to try to get it done. I will try to answer questions and why I'm doing it and how I'm doing it. You guys are going to be asking questions. There's certain things about how to stand when you're plein air painting and why we do things and all that. So it's not going to be like a demo like, let's just see if you could paint, because if you want to see that, you can watch my PBS television show on painting in the national parks. Or you could go to YouTube. Yes?
When you did that painting, you didn't finish it on site, right? Mm-hmm. So you came home and finished it?
Yeah.
And how long did that take?
40 years. Yeah. So, not to be a smart ass, but anyway.
Sound like Moses.
So anyway, well, I've been teaching for 40 years, so it took that long. So anyway, so my process of painting is that I go down into the national parks, I take my easel and I'll set up and I'm out there painting. Now, this painting here on this, and this is a very good question to ask because it's a process of painting. So if I sit down and paint this or this, I can pretty much paint that painting entirely in a day. And for a lot of people, that would be awesome. They'd be like, they'd look at it and go, don't touch it. Don't, you know. And so I painted that whole painting in a day, probably as well as anybody would want to do as a plein air painting. But that's not me. So I can sit and do a plein air painting in a few hours, but I'm not done with it.
Agreed.
I am not that kind of artist. And when it comes right down to it, I would say that very few artists are. And it's not that I can't, I just don't appreciate it to that degree. You know, plein air painting is really an awesome thing. And it's a wonderful thing to do, but it's kind of ruined the art world in a way. Because back in the olden days, you used to go into the galleries, olden days, in the 70s. And you would go into the gallery and you would see these wonderful big landscapes, Scott Christensen's kind of incredible studio stuff, studio paintings. And that'd be $40,000, $60,000, and people would go, man, I would love to have one of those, but I can't afford it. Art wasn't something that they could acquire, but they could dream about it, and you go into the galleries, you say, wow, that's really gorgeous. And when you stand in front of some of those paintings, you're just in awe. Like I said, they don't put seats in front of paintings in the Modern Museum because you don't linger around so much. It's like instant impact. But if you go to the Bierstadt's exhibits and stuff, you really have to grab a seat because literally you'll just pass out. There's a reason why they have chairs in the middle of the museum, is because people stand there long enough and eventually they just drop, you know. So, because they're so incredible. And that's the kind of painter I like. Now, you see a lot of Bierstadt paintings. He came out west When he came out west, he painted on paper, predominantly, and because that was lightweight and he could carry that. And then he would do a lot of sketches, and the sketches that you saw were never meant to be anything but just sketches, and then you go back to his studio and paint. None of the paintings that you actually see that are really his grand works were ever done like outdoors at all, and even Thomas Moran, his best pieces were done in the studio. So why do we plein air paint? It's just because it's a way of sketching. And it's developed with the Impressionists that they would actually see who could paint better in a period of time. And so it became kind of an interesting movement. Can we actually paint in a couple of hours? Can we paint alla prima? And the Impressionists taught us, yes, we can. We can paint in alla prima. We don't have to put all that labor in. But I find that the whole plein air movement has actually kind of taken the mystique out of painting. And so it's kind of something that everybody's trying to do. And it's a wonderful thing to do. It's a wonderful activity. I mean, imagine if you, everybody who I run into says, oh, when I grow up and and retire, I'm going to get a motorhome and I'm going to travel the national parks. And I'm sure every one of you knows somebody who's said that. And then a year later you say, so how's that going? You go, well, we got our motorhome up for sale. I go, why? Well, you know, it's a big hassle to get there. And when you get there, it's a big hassle to set up and take down. And then when you're there, what do? You know, you spend 3 weeks in Yellowstone. Ooh, after 2 drives, you've seen it. And it's like, how many mud pots do you want to see? Right? So then they end up going, well, let's go to Yosemite. And then you go here. And you go here, here, here with all of the burden. And, you know, even have you ever emptied out a toilet out of an RV? Yeah. It's not romantic at all. And the thing is, well, you know, I had a trailer, you know, the beautiful aluminum, shiny gold, you know, Airstream kind of thing. It was a Silver Streak, but it was just as gorgeous. A little higher end than the Airstream. And finally, I was dumping my crap at a station, and I got in a big fight with somebody there. And finally, John said, that's it, we're going. Almost ran the guy over. The next day, it went up on Craigslist. So it was like, that's what happens to people who own motorhomes.
The thing that scares me and bothers me more than that is the amount of crowds that are at these parks now.
Oh yeah, the parks are completely a different thing. But the thing is, when you get there, it's like, what are you going to do? Well, this is a wonderful activity to do. And throughout my television show, it's like, if you're going to go travel the national parks, do something. And it doesn't mean painting. You could write music or write poetry or take up an instrument or something, because you're going to be in the parks for hours. And as romantic as it is, most people don't know how to appreciate nature. But when you paint, I mean, most of you agree that most of you haven't even seen nature until you actually start painting. And when you're out in it, it's a different experience. So when I go out to paint, I can actually put this whole painting in a day. And I've done 40 by 60 paintings where I just like barrel in. I mean, I could bring one tomorrow that, you know, it's one day. And you can see what you can get done. You can get the lights, the shadows and stuff. And you swear it was a finished process. If one of you remind me, I'll bring it. You'll go, oh my God. But it was done in 4 to 6 hours, somewhere around there. All these are. But then I look at it and I go, like the most most plein air paintings, oh, that's kind of nice. And then I go over there, well, that's kind of nice. Oh, that's kind of nice. You know, and the evolve. So I like more of the Bierstadt Hudson River School painters. I like to bring my people into the painting, and then I go, pull up that bench in the middle of the room and sit for a while. So galleries now are filled with a bunch of kind of insignificant little vignettes of paintings, done kind of mostly chalky and very brushy, with kind of a really gaudy gold frame around the outside. And the paintings are all about $1,000. And that's like, oh, that's nice. People can afford them. Galleries love it because they can sell merchandise to everybody who comes in. So it's kind of this whole cliquey kind of thing. Nothing wrong with it. But I'm a little bit more of a romantic. So here I take this, and obviously I've got a moose. You know, that moose, I had to catch him 4 times and got him to stand there. What's great about the plein air painting is like handwriting. It's beautiful communication with land and scape and stuff. But I love going through. So when I do one of these paintings like I do with animals and stuff, because people go, wow, you have to chase after these animals up on the cliffs. And I love animals on cliff. I don't know, because my life is kind of always at a balancing act and I'm always at the edge. And so all of my animals are kind of always doing that. This one's not. But they go, how do you get that? And I go, well, I sit in front of an empty canvas. They go, you don't have a picture? And I go, no, I didn't have a picture of this. And what I do is, in my mind, because I've painted so much plein air, that's really where the secret is. Because when you're out there painting, you actually start feeling what it's like to be out there. And you can start actually being in places without being there and without the drugs. So turpentine gets you there, kind of, but you've got to be, you got to be there to experience nature. What I do is I imagine being in a canyon someplace and I stumble upon a moose. And I'll start with a blank canvas like this. And I'll start with a scribble of a moose, and then I'll kind of tell the story of some fallen logs and stuff. And I think to myself, I love logs laying underwater. So I put the moose in. I want to put his feet around lily pads because lily pads on water are really cool. And then that kind of shows the edge of a water. And then how do you paint the logs under the water? So then I start with kind of a question or curiosity. And I go, where's my center focal point? Well, I want it somewhere on the moose, but I also don't want to have it, if you notice, the center focal point isn't really, it's on the eye, it brings us there, but it really is, when you squint your eyes, the light on the horn. And it's just a little spot there. And so what that does is kind of gives us a little play, because we want to look at the eye, but then we're distracted by the horn, but they're kind of close together, so we're still in the same zone. So I play with that, and then I start with trees. And at some point in my drawing, this might have been a waterfall in the back. And then I think, oh, that's kind of contrary, because mooses kind of hang out where it's kind of soggy and stuff. And then, yeah, so I have a painting at home. That's a mother bear and a cub. And originally there was a mother bear standing on a forest floor and a cub kind of climbing over a log to try to get to mom. Okay, kind of a neat little story. And I looked at it, and after I painted, it's this size. And then when I finished, I looked at it, first layer, 6 hours. Then I looked at it and go, that's kind of boring. So I said, I think mom should be standing, we should make this a waterfall. So I brought a big waterfall in, and so mom now is standing in the water, and the cub now is standing on a rock. And there's a big fish in mom's foot. You know, so obviously she's teaching her little cub to fish. And now the story's a little more interesting. But I had to negotiate a forest flat scene like this now into a waterfall, and so now everything's vertical instead of horizontal. So the process changes and changes and changes until I go, oh, that's good. So what may have started off on the ground might end up on the edge of a cliff. You can do that if you have a lot of experience. And then what happens is that finally when I get to the zone, I actually will start drawing the moose. Now, you know, I haven't spent lots of my life around mooses, living up in Mount Shasta in San Francisco. I kind of know the anatomy of animals, and so I start sketching kind of how I want them to be. So it's natural. Now, Michelangelo had said if you really want to be able to sculpt something, you have to know it. So if you look at Michelangelo's sculptures, you'll notice that a lot of sculptures are of male, and they're like holding up tombs. And a lot of his sculptures were never finished. But you have this incredible muscular body that's holding up a big stone tomb. How would a human body hold up a tomb? You can't get a model to do that. In order to do that, you have to really know the human anatomy. And then you torque it. You bend it, you shape it. So when you're working with things out of your memory, you have to stay in your memory and say, this is what I want. And so you stay steadfast. I want to see the back of the moose turned in. I want his head's up. I want the light a certain way. I want his head turned a certain way. I want his body, his gesture. Everything in, I pre-plan it. And then we live in a world of Google. And so once I have the idea down, then I go to Google and I start looking at, what does a moose butt look like if it's turned that way? And then I won't find a moose that's shaped just like that, nor do I want to, because then I feel like I'm transforming that moose. But what I do is I start checking to see, you know, what does the front of the moose look like if it's at that angle as opposed to this angle? And, you know, what is the width of the neck, and how does that attach to the body? And what kind of horns does it have? And there are all kinds of mooses out there. There's all kinds of breeds and stuff. And there's all kinds of horns and things like that. And then you just start adopting the drawing to have all this stuff. But I'm doing all that stuff on top of the painting that I spent 4 hours painting, 6 hours painting. So the initial painting of this looked like a moose out of my memory, exactly how I wanted. And if you looked at it, you said, well, that's done. But I want to be able to take it further and bring more into it. And so I go in and I might have the forest really vivid, and then I start toning the forest down to bring the moose out. What was really important to me is the light going to the wall over there. So I wanted the light to go all the way out, and every one of these cross sections that are in here are on means. And so I measured out the means, and when I put a log in, the log went from a mean from the bottom up to another mean junction over here. So where that's rested, everything is literally just placed, like the log in the front is placed to bring your eye. This line here goes to this stick here that points inward. And all of my paintings are all designed to go back in. If you notice, this line comes back down, that line goes back up, and all kind of is designed to purposely bring you back into the thing. And you can't do that when you're just copying a picture. So all of that stuff is actually done out of my head. This, when I got back with the sketch, I went back into the studio, and then I went with palette knife and did all of the work. There's several hundred hours worth of work on top of the sketch, but no, it wasn't done on location. This is a masterpiece. Masterpiece started doing canvas boards. All these companies are starting to do canvas boards, and Masterpiece is just one of them. He has, fine oil primed surfaces, and then this is a little lower grade surface. I told Masterpiece 15 years ago that he should be making canvas boards, that this whole plein air thing was going to take over. And after 15 years, he finally decided, maybe I should have listened to Stefan. He listened to me. I told him 15 years ago he should start making golden mean canvases, and guess what? He's like the only company out there that does them. So anyway, so I start off with a canvas board. Usually I work on smaller canvases. My thing with canvases now is that I no longer work on canvases this small. In fact, that's done on a board. That's not even done on a canvas either. On a masonite board. So the masonite boards that are, you can use primer, auto primer on, a spray primer, they're actually really pretty good. And some people have listened to my recipes and they go, oh my God, you've saved me a ton of money. I like working on that better than anything. And it costs them auto primer, spray. Rust-Oleum.
You can get it at Home Depot.
Home Depot. You can go to Home Depot, buy a huge masonite board, have them cut it into 8x10s, 9x12s, 12x16s, and then buy a couple cans of Rust-Oleum auto primer and prime them. 98 cents a canvas. And it's just as nice as the ambersand expensive ones. Now this is an ambersand canvas. I like working with them when I go bigger canvases because they actually will put a frame in behind it and makes it a little bit more substantial. But that one does not have the frame in it. That's just one big piece of masonite. The reason why I stopped using canvases is because I thought to myself, why did they invent canvas? And the reason why is because back in the olden days, paintings were predominantly done on boards. The Renaissance happened, they needed paintings for churches and the Medicis and stuff. And these boards were too heavy and too impossible to actually manufacture. So they started making canvases. And the canvases that they made were done so they could be rolled up and moved. And they were trying to finish the canvases to be like the surface of the wood panels. So the canvas isn't superior. It is a new product. But the thing is, I don't think anybody should work on canvases until they go bigger than 24 by 36, because after that it becomes too heavy. And if any of you lifted this up into my car, you'd go, wow, you'd need to put that into a stud. It's a really, really heavy painting. Anything bigger would just be like impossible to hang. But anything smaller, I recommend not using canvases at all. And the reason for that is because the tooth of the canvas, now they make really fine canvases and that's a whole different thing, but the tooth of the canvas actually ruins the luminosity of the painting. So all of those little bumps are like pores in a face. And if you're trying to get a luminous face, you put makeup on and try to get rid of the pores. I know that from my television show. I wore makeup. I don't know how women can do that, but I have big pores, so I had to put makeup on out there so that my face looked good. It's like I couldn't wait to get through filming, and it's like, get the shit off. It's like, oh, it's awful. A board allows you to have a beautiful surface without all that. And if you look at surfaces like this wall, where it's shiny, it's more luminous, and where all the bumps are, the light is broken. And you don't want that in a painting because it dulls the painting down. You want the painting to illuminate. And just the surface itself makes a huge difference.
If you'd like to try coaching for yourself, whether you're a beginner or an advanced painter, please don't hesitate to give me a call at 415-606-9074.
Join us on our website at www.thegrandview.org and get more information about our show. There you can download our free book, Everything You Need to Know About Outdoor Painting.